have to understand that if you seek that office, you have to be prepared to give your life to it. That essentially the bargain that any president, I think, strikes with the American people is you give me this office, and in turn, my fears, doubts, insecurities, foibles, need for sleep, family life, vacations, leisure is gone. I mean, I am giving myself to you, and the American people should have no patience for whatever's going through your head because you've got a job to do. And so how I think about it is that you don't make that decision unless you are prepared to make that sacrifice, that trade-off, that bargain. And I think that what's difficult and important for somebody like myself who has a wonderful, forbearing wife and two gorgeous young children is that they end up having to make some of those sacrifices with you. And that's a profound decision that you don't make lightly. I think those who make mistakes, I suspect, in the president's office, make it because they haven't fully thought through the dimensions of that choice.
Can you imagine yourself at some point making that kind of commitment?
Sure. I didn't say I had. I just said I could imagine myself doing it.
Second, I know that many Americans are also worried about the potential risks to the United States. So I want to be very clear. We do not expect harmful levels of radiation to reach the United States, whether it's the West Coast, Hawaii, Alaska, or U.S. territories in the Pacific. Let me repeat that. We do not expect harmful levels of radiation to reach the West Coast, Hawaii, Alaska, or U.S. territories in the Pacific. That is the judgment of our Nuclear Regulatory Commission and many other experts. Furthermore, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and public health experts do not recommend that people in the United States take precautionary measures beyond staying informed. And going forward, we will continue to keep the American people fully updated, because I believe that you must know what I know as president.
For January 20th, 2017. This video is called Fukushima Melts, Obama Goes Golfing. That is basically exactly what happened. Obama tells the USA no danger from Fukushima and then flies to Brazil with GE and Westinghouse bosses. He left with his family on an unplanned trip to South America with GE CEO. The day after the earthquake, Obama goes golfing. While the earth shakes and Japan quakes, Obama walks down the fairway of life smelling the roses. Someone should have told him that he's out of bounds, he didn't make the cut, you're below par, you're out of bounds, and you're an a-hole in one. Now before that later trip, actually on March 11th at 2:46 p.m., a magnitude 9 earthquake hits Japan. He spends his day on the 12th golfing. On March 11th, the quake causes serious damage at the Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO. 8:15 p.m., Japanese government declares emergency. On Saturday, March 12th, the day Obama goes golfing, at 6:22 p.m., an explosion at reactor unit 3 blows the roof off. Monday, March 14th, 11 a.m., a hydrogen explosion at number 3 damages the cooling system. Tuesday, March 15th, 6 a.m., an explosion rocks number 2 reactor, damaging the suppression pole. 8:54 a.m., fire breaks out in cooling pond for nuclear fuel at number 4 reactor. Wednesday, March 16th, at 7 a.m., a second fire is at number 4 reactor. 5 a.m., the head of the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, tells Congress spent fuel rods in number 4 have no water in the spent fuel pool. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yuko Idano says he cannot rule out the possibility of a meltdown at all 3 of the plant-damaged reactors. Why will the Obama administration not admit that the Fukushima radiation is poisoning Americans? We all know that the radiation from the stricken Fukushima plant has spread around the globe and is poisoning people worldwide. We all know that on the west coast of the United States is being polluted with radioactive debris, and the oceans and beaches that border them and even the air is becoming more polluted by radioactivity as time goes on. How Obama made Fukushima worse? The Obama administration's failure to alert Americans of the danger of Fukushima radiation is motivated by corporate politics and the interests of the nuclear power industry. The March 11, 2011 earthquake off the northwest coast of Japan wrecked a complex of nuclear power plants, throwing 3 units into meltdown and exploding high-level radionuclides into the environment. With the industry's reputation and billions of dollars in financial arrangements hanging in the fire, the president chose expediency, saying there's no threat to Americans. These assurances were highlighted recently when Fukushima Daiichi operators reported that since the earthquake has been spilling large amounts of radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. While great efforts have been made to sequester hot water in tank farms, the tanks are leaking and the buildings are insecure. Among the toxins soaking coastal zone soils are fission products, cesium-134 and 137, strontium-90, iodine-131, and 129, along with various isotopes of tritium, uranium, and plutonium. These elements and hundreds of others have escaped containment and are moving into the North Pacific at the rate that varies from 300 to 900 tons of water per day. Following the president's lead, most of the media has ignored the story, leaving many Americans in the dark. But the blinders are off in Alaska and the west coast of North America as more people figure the implications of tainted seafood. Pacific tuna ranges between California and Japan, and its annual migration. Sampled by scientists from Stanford University in 2012 and 2013, tuna were found with elevated cesium-134 and 137 in their muscle tissues. Now, the Pacific Ocean is a huge pool. For these fish to have this cesium in them means that this meltdown is probably way more imaginable than anybody can imagine. Distrust of safety assurances here and in Japan mounted when the plant operator, TEPCO, admitted that it had lowballed previous data and that actual releases were 20 to 30% greater than earlier claimed. Numbers are being revised upward almost daily. The Japanese government, as expedient as Obama, quickly raised the allowable dose from 1 millisievert to 20 millisieverts per year, 20 times higher than the limit on March 11th. People who have been evacuated remain at home soaking in cesium. Radionuclides concentrate as they move along the food chain, from plankton, kelp, and herring, and up the line to salmon, seals, bears, and people. Cesium-concentrated food bioaccumulates in the heart and endocrine tissues, as well as kidneys, small intestine, pancreas, liver, and spleen. Children, particularly girls, are many more times susceptible than adults in the effects of ionizing radiation. The U.S. government organized a multi-agency stealth response in the wake of the reactor meltdowns. Friends of the Earth and others filed Freedom of Information Act requests to see how the crisis was being managed in the days after March 11th. A trove of emails moving between the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, its field agents in Japan, and other agencies show efforts to downplay concern and withhold information. Within days of the event, federal managers emailed tallied plumes of iodine-131 as they approached America. supervisors demanded confidentiality while maintaining a press blackout, assuring that most Americans had no chance to prepare or mitigate. Hiroki Koide, assistant professor at Kyoto University's Research Reactor Institute, represents a growing consensus that speculates the nuclear fuel in the 3 melted units had burned through the containment vessels and the basement foundations. The molten fuel, about 360 tons, is now tunneling through geological strata that underlie the Japanese archipelago. If true, TEPCO's engineers have lost control, with no options for retrieval. This is an unprecedented catastrophe with no end in sight. The Fukushima disaster is worse than Chernobyl. It's ongoing. While the North Pacific is a big place, wind and currents move in Alaska's direction. Dilution is not a solution. While the radiation pouring out of Fukushima can't be seen or smelled, its implications to Alaska's fisheries, the economy, and cultural resources are obvious. It's past time to begin talking about the threat and planning for the consequences. The media propagation arm of the administration pushed the idea that radiation from Fukushima was low risk, and you could swim in the ocean for 6 hours every day for a year and receive a dose more than 1,000 times less than a dental X-ray. Continuing reports coming out of Japan indicate the media, controlled by this administration, is lying. Constraints of the press by the Japanese Government Secrecy Act continue to hide the full human, financial, and environmental costs of the disaster. Levels of strontium-90 concentrations outside the destroyed plant spiked 1,000% in 3 months from April 2015 to July 2015. Censored and heavily redacted emails from the U.S. government scientists and officials reveal that there were major concerns among American policymakers shortly after the devastating Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster in March 2011 that there would be widespread radiological contamination and spikes in thyroid cancer rates. Nuclear science experts were clearly concerned that radioactive fallout from the disaster would not merely spread to the U.S. West Coast, but cause a spike in thyroid cancer rates there as well, though none of those concerns were published by reports or expressed publicly by the Obama administration at the time. The operator of the stricken Fukushima nuclear power plant has revealed that 600 tons of reactor fuel melted during the disaster, and that the exact location of the highly radioactive blobs remains a mystery. In an exclusive interview with foreign correspondent, the TEPCO Electric Power Company's chief of decommissioning at Fukushima, Naochiro Musada, said the company hoped to pinpoint the position of the fuel and begin removing it from 2021. But he admitted the technology needed to remove the fuel has not been invented yet. Once they find out the condition of the melted fuel and identify its location, they believe they can develop the necessary tools to retrieve it, so it's important to find it as soon as possible, he says. Since the Fukushima disaster, TEPCO proved to be less than reliable on the facts regarding the seriousness of the problem, which could mean their numbers are lowballed. With the Secrecy Act enacted by the Japanese government, the true condition of the Fukushima disaster remains under wraps, as reporters are punished for disseminating information of the nuclear disaster. Reports coming out of Japan indicate a 6,000% rise in thyroid cancer in the region since the 2011 disaster. However, a committee reviewing the screenings hesitate to peg Fukushima radiation as the cause. The committee agreed not to rule out Fukushima radiation since the cases are similar to those observed after the Chernobyl disaster in 1981. A mysterious die-off continues in the ocean of the Pacific Oceans. Researchers expressed concern over radioactive material bioaccumulating in fish and marine animals. Seeing as the Fukushima disaster remains uncontained and out of control after 5 years, bioaccumulation in fish and marine animals grows as contaminated water pours into the Pacific from Fukushima. Yet, U.S. agencies and the Obama administration remain silent to real dangers, and experts maintain it's safe to go in the water, and don't worry about the food coming from contaminated waters as the safe level for radiation was raised. Here's a suggestion for these experts. You first. You go jump in a lake. You eat the cesium-contaminated fish at safe levels. The contamination cannot be contained and its spread is imminent. Nothing can change that. However, Americans deserve to know the extent of the problem, the risks, and what measures to take to limit their exposure in order to safeguard themselves and their children as much as possible. Withholding of information on the Fukushima radiation risk by the federal government and the states border on negligence and definitely point to dereliction of duty. More than 10 million bags of contaminated soil and waste have so far been collected. The bags are now stored in thousands of sites around Fukushima, with some of the piles several stories high, and actually you can go on the Google Maps and check them out. One thing I have learned from Fukushima is you have to now accept that all nuclear power plants, wherever they are in the world, that you can have this kind of very catastrophic accident and you could release a significant amount of radiation and have a decade-long cleanup effort on your hands. The other thing I learned is Obama's golf game is not good. Like Fukushima, he's a hack. Golf is a game where the ball lies poorly, and he's great at that, lying. Just remember this: Obama knew, the White House knew, Hillary knew. Who didn't know? Us.
With that, I just have two more words to say. Obama out. And going forward, we will continue to keep the American people fully updated, because I believe that you must know what I know as president. Because I believe that you must know what I know as president.